IVF and infertility are a mess. It's an emotional mess, it's a financial mess, it's a million things. My husband and I are 7.5 years into our journey with infertility. We've been pretty active for 5 years now, trying to find some results, and we just recently invested in IVF. And sadly, last week found out that the results for that were a big no. So I have compiled a resource, just about 5 different resources that I really rely on in my emotional journey with IVF. And I hope that they can be a help to someone else out there who may be going through a similar process. I have lived overseas before. We spent 3 years in Russia. I've gotten to spend a month in cities like Budapest, Riga, Tallinn, Prague, and other places. And recently, my husband and I spent a month in Panama City. And that was for our IVF travel. If you've ever lived overseas, you know there's some stress that's involved with that. I was familiar with all of that, but I wasn't prepared for IVF in the midst of travel as well. So here are some of the strategies that I use to make my way through that. The first resource that I've really relied heavily on is books and getting wonderful ideas from that. So one of the first ones that comes to mind is Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. This has been a great resource for me, especially with like the anxiety, depression, fixation, just like tendencies where my mind starts to get really fixated on what I'm going through. Then I love how that book is organized. It has like really helpful chapter titles, so you can kind of flip through to what you're struggling with at the time and get an idea of what's going on in your brain as you're dealing with that type of stuff. A second book that's been really helpful is The Mindful Way Through Depression. And I encountered this book when I was just in a long stretch of realizing like my personality doesn't feel like it normally does. I feel like I'm being changed by the circumstances that I'm walking through. And so I found this book in my library app, and it was like having a little life buoy thrown to me when I was kind of drowning or was really tired of treading water. And so just having that lifesaver to hold on to really helped. Mindfulness is a habit of focusing your mind on your present, of tuning in to what your senses are telling you. And I feel like it's helped me maybe stop a tendency of looking too far forward or being frustrated with circumstances from the past, and find a way in a hard day to feel a little bit more grounded and emotionally healthy. When you get into mindfulness, I think it's kind of hard to think of living without it after that. So take it or leave it, but that one has really helped me. A third resource would be Overcoming Fear, Worry, and Anxiety by Elise Kilpatrick. I haven't read this one cover to cover, but I do rely on flipping through it when I need a helpful resource. Okay, if mindfulness is kind of like having a lifesaver, this book is like building an entire boat to get you through a hard time. So walking with God through pain and suffering is just such a comprehensive manual to help you build a worldview and a theology that can help you through really hard times. I realize that'll look different for different people with different faith backgrounds, but one of the things that I love about the Timothy Keller resource that I just mentioned is how comprehensive. He does a comparison of a lot of different faiths and what their worldview is for suffering and pain, the origin of it, and he really gets into that. So it's a great resource to know about, just to have on your radar, and it's on my read and reread and revisit list. The fifth book I would recommend is Extreme Ownership by Navy SEAL Jocko Willink. He served in Afghanistan, and the stories that he brings to mind not only help me to distract me from whatever feelings of sadness I might be feeling, but they've also really helped me switch my mindset from one of feeling like, woe is me, and I can't believe all these outside circumstances are affecting my life and making it so hard. And I realized there's so much that I can do. Yes, there's always going to be things that are outside of my control, but there's so much that I can influence. So I love this book. Extreme Ownership has helped me to flip from focusing on the things that are outside of my control to taking responsibility for the things that are inside of my control. And it's a lifestyle shift that just has incredible long-term ripple effects. So I love that book. Psalms, both written and sung, are my second go-to resource. There's 150 Psalms. There's so many that I kind of get confused about each one, but I loved finding out that Psalms generally fall into categories. There are Psalms of lament, there are Psalms of praise, there are Psalms of thanksgiving, there's Psalms of taking refuge in the Lord. So this is just an incredible resource, and as I've tried to learn more about how to use it well, I chose 5 Psalms for my year, and each one of them is from a different category. So I'm relying on those psalms throughout this year. And I ended up searching in Amazon Music because that's what I use. I just typed in the psalm, and what do you know? A lot of psalms have already been set to music. I have not only found beautiful settings of the psalms that I was focusing on this year, but I found new artists and groups that I hadn't accessed before. So building that playlist and relying on it heavily has been huge. Yeah, listening to music during a hard time is already going to be a blessing, but having a set playlist that's something that you meditate on and you come back to, it's such an asset. I hope that could be an encouragement. I've also found that listening to music and being fed by the words is a bit of a skill, and a few ways that I'm trying to teach myself how to do that more effectively is by being still and listening to 1 or 2 songs as an emotional reset. I'll also put a song on repeat and just practice singing along while I'm doing the dishes or anything until I feel like I've really understood all of the lyrics from that piece. Another way that I have focused on learning music well is by trying to play it myself. I love playing piano or violin. Maybe I'll even have the speaker on and play along with an existing artist or group. But all 3 of those have just been approaches to help songs sink deeper into my heart and feed myself during times of emotional sorrow. This one is going to be a bit of a no-brainer for some of you out there who are already gifted at empathy and feeling your own emotions. But I am far more infatuated with productivity and getting things done. So it has taken a little bit of extra effort on my part to help me sit down and take time to prioritize processing emotions. So whether that's journaling or talking with a friend or finding another way to share what I'm experiencing, I do need that time out a little bit. It's a lot easier for me to let other people around me have emotions and maybe to respond to those emotions than it is for me to prioritize what I'm actually feeling. So as simple as that Pixar movie is, with the 6 different emotional stereotypes of fear and worry, sadness, disgust, and joy, I've been so blessed by trying to name my emotions and understand kind of what the driving force is behind all of those. The annoying thing about emotions is that whether or not I take the time to sit down and process them and hand the little microphone to them and give them a chance to share information with me, those emotions are going to affect my life and my health. And the more that I've read about trauma or various things, I've realized that your emotions are bound up in your experience of life. And so it's such a healthy thing to prioritize processing them and creating room even for sadness. My 4th resource would be vulnerability with friends. This is hard. I think I've noticed in both infertility and journeys with singleness that the tendency over time is to get more and more withdrawn. And I'm in year 7 of walking through infertility, and especially with the principles of extreme ownership and trying to set my house in order, trying to take responsibility for everything that I can, I'm at a point where I'm sharing far more than I've ever shared before in this journey. And it's been really cathartic. It's been really healing. It's been really redemptive. I think the fact that we're all designed to live in community and in relationship means that there's that sacrifice of being vulnerable. And I've heard a great TED talk on this. I'll try to find a link for it. But vulnerability is at times the key that we need to go deeper in relationships. And I've certainly found that to be true in my journey. One thing I will say is that it takes discernment and wisdom to know when and what to share. So a quick filter that I'll give for that is just that it helps to categorize your relationships, to understand who your inner circle friends are, who your medium circle friends are, and your outer circle. And by that, I mean that inner circle is going to be family and friends, mentors, people whom you really truly know you can trust. Middle circle friends, maybe coworkers, other relatives, those that you know have similar values, but maybe aren't as involved in like the daily aspects of your life. And then outer circle friends is more like broader members of our community, people that you're going to see on a regular basis, but maybe don't have the deeper connection with. And recognizing those categories can be so helpful. One way that I applied this most recently is when it was the hard day where we got the news. I did end up seeing all 3 categories of those friends, families, and just general acquaintances. And I just filtered through. If it was my close friend, I told them exactly where we were in our process of finding out blood work and what's next and all of that, and I was just 100% open with those. And then with my medium friends, I tried to keep them in the loop, but maybe didn't share as much of the emotional ups and downs that went with it. And with my outer circle acquaintances, even though I was seeing them on a day where a lot of the bigger like facts were coming in, I didn't necessarily talk about it at all. And that created safety and space for me. I didn't feel pressure to process everything that I was experiencing that day with every person that I saw, but it also helped me not over isolate myself. I think if I thought I had to share with everyone, I would have just avoided everyone. So it created a healthy balance. I'm thinking out loud a little bit, so I don't know if that will help, but I hope that it will. My fifth resource is grief. It connects with the sadness and learning to be emotionally honest with myself. But I think grief is what overflows when my inner quietly, slowly filling up sadness. If it was a bucket, and there's this drip, drip, drip of sadness flowing into it, grief results when it's finally like, oh my goodness, the sadness bucket is completely full and it needs to be emptied. And it's usually never happens at just a conveniently wonderful time in life that I realize that I need to grieve. But taking the time to do the work of that grief has been hugely helpful in moving forward in my infertility journey. I think this might be the one that I'm the most passionate about because it's such a missing ingredient. Infertility is a super long journey where you don't have a ton of clear points of knowing like when to grieve or even what to grieve. In a lot of cases, if it's just long infertility, you don't have a clear loss that it's time for me to grieve this. So sometimes my points of grief came when others had the success that I longed for. Yeah, deep breath. But I would say that the biggest gift that has come from taking time to grieve is that it has cleaned my emotional room in a way that lets me get rid of the bitterness, envy, the potential to want what others have received. I think those kind of sneak in with the sadness if I'm not paying attention. And it's this gift of grief, of taking time to mourn what's not in my life that has given me the freedom to let go of those other sneaky little emotional residents that can kind of set up camp in my heart. The only thing worse than walking through infertility is adding a burden of bitterness to that process. And I think it's absolutely natural. It's the tendency that we're all going to have. I'm so thankful that resources like the Timothy Keller book that I mentioned earlier have given me a framework and a worldview and a theology to understand that life is not as it's supposed to be, that I live in a broken world and that brokenness is going to affect me on a regular basis. Infertility is just one of the ways that I've experienced that. So that's a clear aspect of my grief as well. And taking responsibility for that, taking ownership of that, has helped me know that I don't want to add more brokenness to my own heart through bitterness, through covetousness, through envy. It's like I'm already experiencing brokenness. I want to feel sad about that and grieve that rather than adding more brokenness to it that's going to create distance in my relationships. I think probably this area can't really be addressed in the same way by people of different faiths and worldviews. So I hope that this connects with some of you, and for some of you, it may not. So those are my 5 key ideas. If I add a bonus one to it, it would just be that I had no idea how much a lifestyle habit that I have of pursuing health in 8 key areas and taking time on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis to evaluate that health. I had no idea how much of a support that would be as we walked through this most recent round of a failed IVF. It was such a blessing to be sitting in Panama and not just thinking about our fertility journey. I was also spending time working on some work projects that I have, on my piano studio back home, on organizing various things. I also have healthy hobbies and friendships, and all of those 8 key areas, which I can say real quickly are marriage, family, friends, my work life, my finances, my hobbies. Cultivating health in all 8 of those areas just created this framework of support that prevented one really, really sad area from eclipsing everything else in a way that wouldn't have been helpful. So that's my bonus. You can take it or leave it for what it's worth, but I'll definitely give a plug to the Cultivate What Matters planner system because that's the way that my habit got started. And it's a mess. It's not perfect, but it's progress. So thanks for letting me share with you today. And I'm trying to use my YouTube channel to help people find health in 8 areas of their life as well. I'm realizing that's something I'm passionate about. So I hope that you've enjoyed this and maybe click around to some of my other videos. I'm trying to tell our story. I send you a big hug today and blessings to you wherever you are in your journey. Enjoy.